guys, welcome back to the Teacher's Trek. So I have been talking about my student interactive notebooks in a few of my other videos. So I decided to create this setup tutorial on how I get my students' notebooks set up in the beginning of the year. So if you see here down below, you can see a lot of different types of resources that I have. The first one I have is this one subject notebook. Now I get mine from Staples, the Excel version. I just think that this is probably one of the best quality type notebooks. It's very similar to the 5-star notebooks, but I like the Staples brand a little bit more because I like how this pouch is not cardboard, it's plastic, so it's more durable. But it's got the same kind of, really thick material plastic for the cover so that it won't, so that it will not end up, tearing by the end of the school year. So it's gonna last all year. Now you can see here on the screen, I have a lot of other different resources as well. So these are just a few things that you're going to want to get for your classroom if you're going to be doing interactive notebooks. You can get these scissors here, just a class set of scissors. I know that the really small, tiny scissors that are made for elementary school kids are cheaper, but I would suggest investing in, adult scissors if you're teaching high school or even middle school, because it just really strains the children's, their fingers, you don't want to be using these really small scissors to complete tasks. So you're going to want to get materials for the age group that you have. Now another resource that I use with my interactive notebooks are these highlighters. So I get the Sharpie brand highlighter, but any brand will work, of course. But highlighters are really important for documenting notes in the notebooks. I use these as we're taking notes. Students will highlight as we go along. They'll highlight key passages in primary sources and all of that really important stuff to help them. These really just help students pick out really important information in the notebook so that it stands out when they're going back through them. Now for my class, I decided to put this washi tape, see here, put this washi tape up on all of my highlighters just so that I know which ones are mine and that they won't get lost and taken with students after class. It just helps save my materials so that they last a little bit longer. You're also going to want to choose how your students are going to be putting the content in their notebooks. So I use this Elmer's glue stick here, you can see. So I just use this Elmer's glue right here, the all-purpose clear. It's just the cheapest option in my opinion. It's easy to put in cubbies or something like that, so students can grab them very quickly. I know some teachers use tape, double-sided tape. Now this isn't double-sided, but it's tape. But I've had students who wanted to use tape instead, and I let them, whatever floats their boat. But I provided glue sticks for my students. Some students brought in their own tape. And then I had a couple students that like to use staplers to staple in the paper into their notebook. And I just left a few staplers around the room that they could use and pass it around if they ever wanted to do that. But really, it just depends on your preference what you want your students to use to adhese the items into the notebook. So some teachers like to maybe have a bookmark or something in place so that students can easily flip to the page that they are working on. So for my suggestion for bookmarks, you can use just binder clips like this, it's really small ones, and just have students maybe put them at the top of the page where they left off. Just a really simple way for students to keep track of where they are. Some people use Post-it notes, so you can just take a Post-it and stick it somewhere where it will become kind of like a binder tab, like this, so that when they close it, they know where they left off. So some teachers use these here to keep track of each unit that they are doing. So unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, have them down like in a diagonal so that students can easily flip back to past units so that they can study easier. And of course, you can use any extra materials that you want, like paper clips, colored pencils, all of that stuff. This is really just the basic necessities that you need to initially set up your notebooks with the students. So when I ask my students to get a notebook, again, I get them to have these really nice quality notebooks if possible. But I want to make sure that there's at least 100 sheets in the notebook that they get. I know the smaller ones, they come with about 70 sheets at the minimum, and that can run a little bit too close for comfort towards the end of the semester. Usually I get to about page 140-ish with my notebooks, depending on the course, and it's important for them to have enough space in the entire notebook. Okay, so I'm going to clear all this stuff out for a moment so that I can show you a couple examples from the past before I go ahead and get started with creating my notebook. Alright, so this one right here, this is the one that I use for my student teaching experience. So in the front of my notebook, I just kind of had notes throughout my student teaching about different things, just different things that I took, different observations, things from my own classes and all of that. This right here was the very first activity that I actually ever did during my student teaching. I created this myself after seeing an example on Teachers Pay Teachers. I did one for talking about the Great Schism. And so I just created this example page. So you're always going to want to create that example page for your students so that they can see the final product. But yeah, this is just one of the different examples of what you could do. And you can see here, my sample is kind of a rough sample. Because again, this was my very first notebook, and I started a little bit mid-year because I was doing a year-long class, so this isn't actually a full notebook. But you can see just kind of the setup of what one would look like. And these are the cover pages. So for cover pages, you're always going to want to make sure that your students have the name of the unit and their test day. So these were the test days for my students. I also have them do some sort of illustration. Illustration on their notebooks. So I just drew a few flags and then some fireworks for Independence Days. But yeah, you can kind of just see different examples of what kind of activities we do. And I will say with the glue sticks, over time with the Elmer's glue, it does unstick, but I really haven't had that much of a problem with it. Just make sure that you teach your students how much glue they need to use. So yeah, you can just kind of see all my different pages and how it's laid out. I will tell you that always on the right side of the page, I always have our notes. So this is all the teacher input stuff, so stuff that I give them that we go over together as a class. And then over on the left side is always some sort of activity that they do either independently or in small groups. It can vary to a lot of different things. Like this one right here was just a chart. This one I had them do primary source analysis, so I had them write their answers here. I did a web quest here, so these was on 2 pages, so you don't always have to just do notes on this side or an activity on this side. You can do it however you want to do it. Like for example, for this one, I had all notes, but it was all student based, so they did this all themselves. And I took up 2 pages for that. And then just different graphic organizers that I used. Writing prompts were another big thing that I did, maps, and all that stuff. So this is just an example of world history. I can show you another one that I did this past year for American history. So this one is my one subject Excel notebook from Staples. And I will say that my notebooks weren't really the prettiest during my first couple years, but this year I'm going to try and make it a little bit more bright with bright colored Astro Brights paper. I didn't really have a lot of resources last time in my last year. So I have a few pages with colors, but mostly it's white. And I had them color a lot to make it kind of brighten it up. And I got a little lazy towards the mid-year. I got really busy, so I kind of lost track of my sample notebook, and I didn't really continue adding in prompts and keys. So half of my notebook is pretty barren. But yeah. So with this, I'm really just trying to show you just kind of what activities I did with my students. I got a lot of things from Teachers Pay Teachers, which is a really awesome resource for getting interactive notebook templates that you can use in your class if you're just starting. But I did make a few of this myself, and I got some of this from my mentor teacher for my internship. And she gave me a lot of really awesome materials that I have used during my first few years. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this up and bring back my new notebook. And I'm gonna pretend like we are setting this up together as a class. So one of the first things I would do before we even get started is I would give them a table of contents. So I would print these out and have them glue it to the first page of their notebooks. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out really quick just because I don't have a paper cutter myself and I want it to fit the page exactly. Alright, so that is the table of contents. So you're gonna always wanna cut your papers to be a little bit smaller than an 8x11, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, because you don't want your students to have it overflowing. And in some notebooks, the pages are actually smaller than 8.5 by 11 and they just don't fit at all into the notebooks. So always trim down your papers for your students. I wouldn't suggest having them cut it themselves because it does take too much time when you add all the time together cutting. So always have your stuff pre-cut for your students. Use a paper cutter the day before and have it all prepped and ready. So now I'm gonna go ahead and glue this down onto page number 1. So you can see at the top, I have already put down the different categories for them to start them off. So if you can see that, there. So my first one says table of contents, page 1 to 2, and thinking maps and mapping rules 3 to 4. So I already put this in them. So I already put this in there for them so that they can kind of see a demonstration of what I expect their table of contents to look like, and also show them how to number their pages. So what I want them to do is to use the range here. Don't just put 1 page per line. Do a range of pages if possible, because usually on the same 2 pages we have very similar ideas going on. We're doing the same kind of lesson. So if I had them do something on the Cold War, some notes, and then an activity, I would just have them do Cold War activity, maybe 50 through 51. Something like that. So again, I just like to put that up there just to model what I'm expecting of them for their table of contents. And really, if you do the ranges, this will last you pretty much all year. I did page 1 to 2, so that should be plenty of space. You can have them write out their own columns if you want to, but again, I think just typing it up for them and giving them this example, especially for younger students, is necessary to kind of help them understand what's expected. All right, so I already went ahead and glued it, and I'm gonna put it face down. Oops. Okay. All right, so that's my first page. So first page and second page is my table of contents. And throughout the year, as we go along, I'm gonna go ahead and create my own table of contents so that I can post this on the board whenever it's time for the notebook checks, so that they can fill all that in. All right, so we have the table of contents already put in place. The next thing I would suggest doing right away is to have them number their pages. So you want to have a specific place for them to put their numbers. You can do it up in the top corner or in the bottom corner, whichever one you would prefer. But I would always do it on the right-hand side because it's easier for you to flip through and see. But I usually have them number at least 1 through 20 at a time, 20 pages at a time, to really kind of get us started so that we're not wasting time wondering which page we're on. They can easily see which one comes next. So I'm going to go ahead and number my pages 1 through 20 really quick. Alright, so I just labeled 1 through 20 on the notebook pages. And again, I just think it's easier to have them pre-numbered as you go along, so it's easier for students to see what pages are gonna come next. Alright, so another thing that I decided to implement this year, I kind of had the idea in the middle of last year and decided to wait till this year to actually implement it, was to use Plickers in my classroom. And if you don't know what Plickers is, it's basically an assessment tool that teachers can use to assess their students. So on Plickers, you can create questions and each student gets their own code. So this is actually 2 different codes, number 1 and number 2. And if you can see, I don't know if it's too small, but you can see this side is A, this side is B, this side is C, and this side is D. So each side is a different answer choice. So you would just come up with a question, add the answer choice, and select the right question. And then you present the question to the students, and the students will use their code to turn it to which side they think is correct. So whatever letter they think is correct, they will have to have the letter at the top. So they'll have to just turn the page. So if they think it's B, they'll have it this way. If it's C, this way. D, it would be this way. Or A, it'll be on this side. So what I thought of doing was cutting out these, handing them out to the students. So I'm going to cut mine out really quick. Alright, so I've got this all cut up. What I thought of doing was flipping over to the back. We have this here, and I was thinking of gluing this to the back. So I would probably print these out on maybe a card stack, something a little bit heavier. Maybe even some colored paper to kind of make it bright and noticeable. But for my example, I'm just going to post it with this plain white paper. So I'm going to put it so that A is on top. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I glue this in. So thinking about it, I might have students use tape for this and tape this down so that it's in there more permanently. I feel like the glue stick might have it come up a few times. I don't want them to lose it. So I would probably definitely have them use some sort of tape or maybe staples with this, just to make sure it's secure, but have them glue this to the back part of the notebook, or you can do the front too, but I'm gonna do the back. And then whenever I wanna use Plickers in my classroom, I can just have them all open up their notebooks to this page, because they all should bring their notebooks every day. And then they can just hold up their notebook whichever way the answer is. So I thought that was a pretty cool idea to use and implement Plickers and make sure that everything is all in one spot. All right, so that is the Plickers. And then really what you want to do when you first, so really what you have just seen here is the basics of what you would want to do to get them started. So as I said, I've already reserved page 1 through 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would have them already glue in all of the stuff that they would have gotten, their thinking maps and then their mapping rules. And then over here on this side would be your first unit page. So I showed you that a few moments ago, an example of a unit page. So you would want to have them create that page initially before you start with your unit to kind of introduce some of the topics that you'll be discussing with your students and have them just kind of organize their notebooks so that they can find everything easier. Now, the main thing about introducing interactive notebooks is explaining to students the rules that you have put in place, the rules and procedures. So how will students get their supplies? Are they going to have them at their desks? Is it going to be individual supplies? Do they bring them to class every day on themselves? Or do they go up to a certain spot in the classroom to grab them every morning before they sit down and get ready? So figure out how you want to implement that. You also want to explain to them how they will be graded. So are you going to just pick a random page to grade? Or are you going to have a rubric set in place to grade them that way? So for me, I just pick out 15 different things to look for. I always look to see if they have the table of contents all up to date, everything's there, and make sure that they have their unit cover pages and make sure that they are colored and illustrated as well. I also look to make sure that they have filled in their guided notes, that they have actually completed the activities on the right side. And I look to see if they've numbered their pages and if they have gotten missing work. So if they were missing a day, did they just leave it blank or did they come to see me during tutoring? So that's really the bulk of implementing interactive notebooks. You just want to make sure that you have procedures put in place so that students know exactly what to do with the notebooks. You want to make sure that they know what you are expecting of them with these notebooks. And as I said, these notebooks don't have to be beautiful. They don't have to be all colorful and Pinterest perfect. As you can see, I only had a very limited amount of color paper that I used in my notebooks during my first few years of using them. One, because I didn't have the resources, and two, because I was really just getting started and I was pulling resources from a lot of different areas to kind of set up all of my stuff. The main benefit though of interactive notebooks is that everything is in one place. We don't have binders where we have loose materials. It's just an easy source for people to go look through. So yeah, this is just some samples of my interactive notebooks that I have made with my students. Again, it's really simple to use these in your It's really simple to use these in your classrooms. I really highly recommend using interactive notebooks, especially for classes like history and English. I just feel like this is a good place to have all of your writing in one spot to keep everything together and just make it feel more like it's personalized. This was my video setup for interactive notebooks, and as you saw, it was pretty simple, right? Just the main thing that you want to remember is that you want to make sure that you have procedures put in place and just have fun with it. There's a lot of really good resources on Pinterest for examples on just different ideas to implement in your interactive notebooks. But I hope that just kind of looking at my samples and seeing kind of the basics of how I implement my notebook was helpful for you. If you have any questions about what I do with my interactive notebooks that I didn't answer in this video, just please leave me a comment down below and I will gladly answer your question. And keep a lookout, I might do another video towards the end of this semester when I finish up with teaching my first semester during my second year, and I can show you kind of how my notebook has evolved over the year. So yeah, if you would like to see more videos like this, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you again for all of you who have already subscribed. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and check me out on Twitter and Instagram. I'm just really excited to be able to bring in just different people from all over the country, all over the world that are interested in teaching, and hopefully my post will inspire you